Incredible discovery. A police dog bites a suitcase, revealing amazing secrets that changed everything. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Officer Jake Reynolds' boots as he and Max, his faithful police dog, patrolled the tranquil streets of Oakwood Pines. The sun hung low, casting golden hues over the vibrant maples, yet something felt unsettling in the air. A dull whisper that pricked at the back of his mind. Max suddenly darted ahead, his instincts igniting, and Jake's heart lurched as he followed. The dog's interest peaked around a dusty, abandoned suitcase nestled behind the trees. Unease churned within him as he approached, the contents of the suitcase heatedly dancing on the edge of his thoughts. With cautious hands, Jake pried it open, and a jumble of papers tumbled out. A trove of incriminating documents revealing land deals orchestrated by Alex Beaumont, the town's most esteemed real estate mogul. Jake's breath hitched as he sifted through the evidence of deceit. Beaumont had exploited families, offering them dreams of home ownership while thieving their hard-earned money. The clarity of this betrayal collided with Jake's idealism. His belief in the goodness of people suddenly cast in shadow. The ambient warmth of family values felt more like a distant memory. He could practically hear the echo of laughter from his children, yet dread tangled within him. Could he do this? Could he shatter the facade of a man revered in their community? Beaumont, with his slick charm and charitable facade, was a beloved figure, presenting a challenge to Jake's resolve. Anxiety twisted in his stomach. Was he truly prepared to drag Oakwood Pines into chaos? What will Clara say? He thought with an unsettled heart. She expected him home with whimsical stories of their town, not with devastating claims that could ripple through their lives, turning friends into foes. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The revelation of Beaumont's actions left Jake suffocating beneath a weight of urgency as he wrestled with the implications underpinning his role. He peered into the bright future he envisioned for his children, their schooling, safety, stability, all now woven into a dangerous web. Fear snaked around his thoughts, and he felt trapped, torn between duty and the responsibility of keeping his family safe. The internal struggle intensified. How could he balance the moral compass guiding him with the perilous risks posed by confronting someone as influential as Beaumont? As his own family's history echoed in his mind, the struggle against unscrupulous developers long ago took on a new significance. Could he be a voice for the past and the future? Or was he doomed to become just another piece in Beaumont's silver-tongued scheme? With his heart heavy, Jake stood at the precipice of choice. The consequences loomed larger than life, ready to engulf the very essence of who he was. At that moment, everything he believed in teetered between integrity and irreparable chaos. This was only the beginning. What awaited him on the other side if he dared to step forward? The question hung in the autumn air, poised to unravel the fabric of his life, leaving only tension and shadows in its wake. The crisp autumn air carried a sharper chill as Jake felt the weight of his discovery settle deeper in his chest. He glanced at Max, the dog's watchful eyes reflecting an unspoken loyalty, an anchor against the sea of uncertainty swamping his mind. Fighting the turmoil within, Jake faced a decision that would shape not just his life, but the future of Oakwood Pines. His instinct screamed at him to report it, to bring the evidence of Beaumont's corruption to the precinct. But visions of Clara's worried gaze and his children's playful laughter loomed large, urging him to reconsider. What if exposing Beaumont shattered their mundane happiness? Those family dinners filled with chatter and warmth began to seem fragile, hanging by a thread as he entertained thoughts of betrayal. He shoved the documents back into the suitcase, his fingers trembling as realization struck him. This wasn't merely about corruption, it was about integrity. Jake blocked out the weight of potential repercussions long enough to admit to himself that he had a duty not just as a police officer but as a father. The very people who looked to Beaumont for guidance and support deserved to know the truth. Deep within, another voice arose, one that called upon his training, his years as a dedicated officer who had sworn an oath. The men and women who formed the fabric of his community deserved protection, not exploitation. Jake forcefully took a breath, turning the suitcase over in his mind. He could feel the truth vibrating in his bones, urging him to take action. What would happen as he gathered more evidence? Building a case may very well mean coming face to face with Beaumont. Thoughts of their previous encounters flooded back. Beaumont's effortless charm, the way he spoke about his philanthropic ventures, all disguised the concealed greed that Jake could no longer ignore. In those moments, he'd given Beaumont the benefit of the doubt, but now, confronted with the raw reality of deceit, Jake felt his viewpoint shifting into focus. With a sudden flush of resolve, he pulled out his phone, Notion bubbling to life. If Jake were to confront Beaumont, he needed a plan, a strategy both methodical and stealthy. He needed proof of ongoing activities, not just this one-off evidence. Jake's mind raced as ideas began to intertwine: surveillance, gathering testimonies, perhaps even enlisting Max in more abstract ways than mere companionship. But as he outlined his plan, doubt crept back in, wrapping around his heart like a vice. What if Beaumont suspected he was onto him? What if this increased scrutiny put his family in danger? Those glimmering dreams he had for his children, their education and future, suddenly felt at risk. The tension between his call of duty and his chief responsibility as a father threatened to fracture his resolve. However, this internal conflict began to morph into determination, igniting a flicker of purpose. What if he could do both? Protect his family by exposing the corrupt power that sought to manipulate them? What if he could use this moment as a lesson, instilling values in his children about courage and integrity? The time had come to reclaim agency over his choices. Steeling himself, Jake mentally prepared. Tomorrow he would confront the shadows threatening Oakwood Pines head-on. No more complacency, no more silence. The looming dawn promised clarity, but with it came a weighty threat as he sensed the approaching storm. Would Beaumont's facade hold, or would it be torn asunder? As the sunlight dipped below the horizon, excitement mingled with anxiety in his gut, a tempest of anticipation. But the most crucial question remained. Would he emerge victorious, or would the secrets of Beaumont consume everything he held dear? The path ahead twisted like the winding trail through the autumn woods, but Jake Reynolds was ready to walk it. It was a journey into darkness, but perhaps a light awaited at the end. In that uncertainty was a burning ambition that would not be extinguished. The moment of truth was quickly approaching, and Jake's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and excitement as the keys to this decisive chapter lay just ahead. The morning dawned with an unsettling stillness, the world outside Jake's window veiled in a dense fog. He could barely discern the outline of the trees, their limbs reaching out like fingers clawing through the mist. The heavy air matched the weight that settled on his chest, pressing down on him with each breath. Today was the day he had prepared for, yet he felt painfully unsteady on that precipice. Jake padded across the soft carpet, careful not to disturb Clara, still lost in sleep, with a gentle smile tracing her lips. He watched her for a brief moment, committing her presence to memory. Then, with a deliberate quietness, he slipped out of the room, his resolve solidifying with every step into the wayward world that awaited him. In the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee took the edge off his nerves, but the darkness of uncertainty still tainted his thoughts. He could not afford any lapses in focus. Collecting himself, he replayed his plan. Surveillance would require meticulous timing, an act of calculated audacity. He envisioned the ways Beaumont operated, his seemingly innocuous interactions in the community, weaving a facade thick enough to obscure his machinations. Before he left, Jake knelt beside Max, who lay sprawled across the living room floor. The dog raised his head, eyes glimmering with unmistakable loyalty. With one reassuring pat, Jake felt a tether to that steadfastness, reminding him that even in the murkiest waters, he had a partner in this perilous endeavor. Stepping outside, the brisk air bit at his skin. Each breath felt charged with possibility and peril intertwined. He couldn't shake the shadow of doubt threatening to creep back in, creating images of his family somehow becoming collateral damage in his pursuit of justice. A pit formed in his stomach as he navigated a mental labyrinth, but there was no turning back now. As Jake began his meticulous observation from a distance of Beaumont's usual haunts, he felt fragments of the past echoing through his mind. The hard lessons he absorbed from mentors in the force, taught in the unyielding environment of the precinct. Patience and perception had been crucial. He recalled how they drilled into him the importance of evidence. A single thread can unravel a tapestry. He could be that thread. The initial hours passed, each minute a pulse of anxious anticipation. Beaumont's movements were predictable, charming in their deceptive normalcy. The man greeted townsfolk with affable gestures that seamlessly masked his illicit dealings. Jake felt anger bubbling within him. Why were people blinded by a polished exterior, unaware of the rot beneath? He decided to follow Beaumont home, a minor risk but necessary to gather more proof. Approaching the older man's residence required patience and stealth. Checking his watch, adrenaline surged through him as he considered how easily everything could go wrong. He needed to leverage the coming confrontation to breach Beaumont's defenses, yet not fully reveal his intent. As the door swung open to reveal Beaumont stepping out, Jake's heart raced. What was he to confront today? The lies? The betrayal? Jake felt the enormity of his undertaking unfolding, enveloping him whole, drowning him in a tide of possibilities. Facing Beaumont meant reckoning with his corruption, but it also meant confronting the man behind the mask he had once admired. Would he be able to maintain his composure under the scrutiny of a man who wielded power with such ease? The question simmered at the back of his mind, growing more complex by the second. Would he dismantle the layers of deceit, or would this encounter expose more of himself than just the truth about Beaumont? The stakes had never been higher, and Jake could feel the impending confrontation shift the ground beneath his feet. How far was he willing to go to safeguard his family and expose corruption? The answer was a storm brewing inside him, waiting to be unleashed at a moment's notice. But as he stepped deeper into visibility, resolute yet trembling, a new sensation seized him. The air thickened with palpable tension, and as he prepared to declare himself, he realized he was no longer just confronting Beaumont. He was facing a part of himself he had long struggled to understand, an emerging courage that threatened to reshape him entirely. And just as Jake resolved to take action, the distant sound of a siren cut through the fog, raising the stakes. Was he truly ready for the storm he was about to provoke? Jake's breath caught as he stepped out from behind a wooden fence, the low growl of his own pulse echoing in his ears. Beaumont was just a few yards away, casually adjusting his cufflinks before stepping towards a plush sedan, an image of casual sophistication. But behind the polished exterior lay a man who was not just an icon of the town, but a puppeteer of lies. Jake felt the weight of his mission, the needs of his family, and the threat of failure colliding violently within him. He had rehearsed this moment endlessly, but nothing could prepare him for the strange blend of dread and resolve that swirled in his gut. Then he caught sight of something unexpected, a figure hidden a few steps away, lurking in the shadows of a nearby tree. The dark silhouette shifted, and Jake squinted to see what it was. Adrenaline flared through him. There was no room for distractions. Every sense screamed at him to remain vigilant. Just as he began to focus back on Beaumont, his world tilted. A softness beneath him. The sound diverted his attention. Max had joined him, his loyal companion unperturbed by the looming tension. The dog's keen instincts and unwavering spirit energized Jake, reminding him of what he stood to lose. With a calculated movement, Jake slipped back, using Max's presence to mask his own. A fleeting moment where doubt flickered in the corners of his mind. Would he be capable of bringing down someone like Beaumont? Could he trust his instincts enough to challenge a man who had so elegantly kept himself above the law? As Beaumont slid into the car, Jake instinctively made a decision. He couldn't rely solely on the evidence he was gathering. He needed to confront the man directly, to shake off the fear with the force of his revelation. Pressing himself further into the shadows, he waited for Beaumont's door to close before stepping ahead, determination firing within him. The rich scent of gasoline mixed with the damp air enveloped him, a bitter reminder of the risks associated with his determination. Jake unclipped his phone, activating a silent recording and letting it rest in his pocket, ready to capture the moment. He needed this, proof not just for the authorities, but for himself. He took a deep breath, a cascade of resolve flowing through him as he approached the vehicle, every footstep deliberate. Before he could second-guess himself, he moved into Beaumont's line of sight, standing poised and ready as the older man glanced up, surprise flaring in his eyes, quickly replaced by the practiced calm of someone who had weathered many storms. "Jake," Beaumont drawled, feigning innocence, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "Cut the charm, Beaumont. We both know why I'm here," Jake shot back, his voice steady. There was power in stating his purpose, and he leaned into that certainty. The man who once inspired respect began to reveal a flicker of something more sinister, a crack in the facade that made Jake pulse with both fear and courage. "You're out of your depth," Beaumont remarked coolly, yet there was a quiver beneath his polished persona. "Some things are better left alone." With those words, Jake felt a wall pushing against him. He understood instinctively that Beaumont would manipulate the truth, twist empathy into weaponry. But Jake had come too far to back down. This encounter was a threshold, one that tested not just the limits of his investigative resolve, but his very identity. "Is that so?" Jake challenged, stepping closer. "Why should I believe a word you say?" In the periphery, movement caught his eye again. The figure he had seen moments before now darted from the shadows. Instinctively, Jake turned, just in time to see a police dog lunging at the figure, jaws snapping just inches from a suitcase they had dropped. The moment trapped them all. The absurdity mirrored the tension in Jake's heart. Surrounded by uncertainty, Jake glanced at Beaumont, who had gone pale, and then back to the chaos before him. The dog's insistence on that suitcase felt impossibly prophetic, echoing Jake's unearthing of secrets. What lay inside could change everything, thrusting them all into a new world where the implications of their actions weighed heavily. And then it struck him. This revelation forged deeper connections, alive in the tension of the moment. How much were they all hiding? The answer stood less than an arm's length away, a storm of discoveries waiting to be unearthed, just like the truth he was chasing. As the cacophony erupted around him, Jake felt the world shift again. There would be no turning back. It was time to face the chaos head-on, armed with the knowledge of what came next. What lay beyond the suitcase could redefine his fight against corruption, beckoning him into a new arena entirely, a place where secrets had teeth. But as he prepared to confront Beaumont, a single question nagged at him, threatening his composure. Was he ready to face not just the man before him, but the undeniable truth hidden within? Jake's heart thundered in his chest, the weight of expectation pressing down on him with each passing second. The chaos at his feet, the flurry of movement, the anguished barks of the police dog, and Beaumont's pale face, painted a picture that felt surreal, yet utterly real. Would this be the moment that defined him, the moment he shifted from the shadows of doubt into the light of resolution? As Jake watched the dog wrestle the suitcase to the ground, the silver latch glinted in the faint light, a mocking beacon of the truth he desperately sought. Beaumont's facade had all but crumbled in the wake of impending evidence. The fear reflected in the older man's eyes spoke volumes about the corruption he wielded like a dark cloak. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an unveiling of everything Beaumont stood for. Fueled by instinct, Jake stepped forward, determined to unveil whatever secrets lay within the battered suitcase. The dog, resolute in its mission, had become a silent ally, a reminder that sometimes strength comes from unexpected partnerships. Jake knelt beside the dog, the vibrations of its excitement resonating in his veins as he reached for the latch. His fingers trembled slightly. It was a clash of anticipation and fear, the spectrum of emotions swirling inside him. "Get back, Jake!" Beaumont's voice sliced through the commotion, his once calm demeanor dismantling before Jake's eyes. There was desperation mingled with anger, a potent cocktail that hinted at the lengths Beaumont would go to shield his truths. But Jake shook off the warning. The adrenaline coursed through him as he deftly flicked the latch, adrenaline setting his senses alight. With a swift motion, he yanked the suitcase open, and the contents spilled out, a jumble of papers, cash, and what appeared to be photographs. The dog barked joyously, as if recognizing the magnitude of what they had uncovered. Jake's pulse quickened. The photographs depicted moments frozen in time, meetings, transactions, and faces of men whose ruination was intricately linked to Beaumont. Each image sent a shockwave of clarity through him. This wasn't just evidence of corruption. This was a map of deceit that connected a whole web of shadows. But the moment was fleeting. An urgency blossomed in his gut. He had to act, to move beyond mere observations and into the active realm of confronting the forces that had controlled so much of his life. Now, with tangible proof at his fingertips, Jake faced a critical choice. Would he confront Beaumont with his findings immediately, or would he gather more evidence, solidifying his case before making a move? Glancing at the photographs, Jake's mind raced. The thought of risking it all for immediate answers clashed with the need for meticulous planning. The stakes had transformed. It was no longer just about him, but about the community shackled under Beaumont's influence. Each second felt elongated, drawing out the tension. "I know what you are," Jake breathed, his voice steadying with newfound resolve. "And I'm not going to let you walk away this time." Beaumont's reaction was telling. The self-assured veneer cracked, revealing vulnerability. "You think this changes anything?" He shot back, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Jake stood taller, the evidence behind him providing a new anchor for his identity. The confrontation had shifted. He no longer felt like a pawn in Beaumont's game. He was awake, armed, and ready to challenge the very man who had tormented him and so many others. But before he could take the next step, a sudden movement made him freeze. Beaumont lunged towards the suitcase in a desperate attempt to reclaim his secrets. The world around them melted into a singular focus. The suitcase lay at the fulcrum of their clash, teetering dangerously between revelation and concealment. "Stop!" Jake barked, his instincts kicking in. The past few days flooded his mind. The lies, the manipulation, the needs of his family driving him forward. That suitcase wasn't just a container of secrets. It represented choices not yet made. In that decisive moment, Jake understood that he had reached a turning point. His decision would ripple through his life and the lives of those he cared about. Each heartbeat echoed the urgency. What would he choose to do next? Would he dive deeper, challenge Beaumont head-on, or strategize to dismantle the corruption piece by piece? With steely resolve, Jake prepared to make his stand in a way that would redefine him. But with a counter-move looming from Beaumont, Jake knew that conflict was inevitable. The battle was not just in the contents of the suitcase, but within himself, an exploration of the man he was becoming. The stakes couldn't be higher. As Beaumont's grip tightened over the suitcase, Jake was left questioning his next move. Would he cement his path toward justice, or slip back into the shadows once more? Jake's mind raced as the tension in the air thickened like a palpable fog. He could sense the impending clash not just between him and Beaumont, but deep within himself. The suitcase held not only evidence of corruption, but also the key to his own transformation. He was tired of being reactive, of letting others dictate the moves he made. "Get away from there!" Beaumont shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of desperation. It pulled Jake back momentarily, the imperfection in Beaumont's tone revealing a glimpse of the man beyond the corruption, a man fearful of losing his empire. Fueled by this insight, Jake steadied himself, the urgency of the situation sharpening his focus. With a flick of his wrist, Jake positioned himself protectively in front of the suitcase. "You've run your game long enough, Beaumont. This isn't your domain anymore." The conviction in Jake's voice surprised him. It was more than just a declaration of war. It was a testament to the awakening of his confidence, the slow but steady realization that he was capable of challenging the status quo. As Beaumont loomed closer, Jake considered his options. He could surrender to the instinct to lash out, to confront him with every dark truth he had discovered. But that approach might bring chaos, a chaos in which Beaumont could easily manipulate the narrative to paint Jake as the reckless intruder, the boy playing at being a man. Instead, he took a deep breath, centering himself. The photographs spread before him were more than just images. They were fragments of reality that held the promise of justice. Pulling from a calm center, Jake devised a new plan. He would not only challenge Beaumont's authority, but would do so with intelligence and purpose. "Every photograph here tells a story," Jake began, speaking as if he were addressing a jury rather than a corrupt businessman. "It's a narrative of betrayal, deception, and fear, and ultimately, one of accountability. You can't silence that truth forever. For the first time, he saw Baldwin falter, the imposing facade of the powerful man giving way to a glimmer of uncertainty. It was a chink in the armor, an opening for Jake to exploit. Driven by a sudden surge of adrenaline, he added, "Tell me, Beaumont, how does it feel to be the man behind the curtain, knowing you had the power to ruin lives?" The other man's face flushed with a mix of fury and shame, a reaction that revealed his deeply embedded motives. No longer a mere adversary, Jake sensed a shift. This was less about winning a confrontation, and more about taking back his own agency. He wouldn't simply confront corruption, he would dismantle it piece by piece. Just as Beaumont's expression twisted into one of rage, a sudden growl from the police dog reminded them both of the companion's presence, the weight of loyalty and instinct manifesting in that moment. Jake turned his gaze to the dog. This was his ally, not just an accidental partner. The dog's spirit mirrored Jake's own awakening. Both were navigating unfamiliar territory but charged by a relentless drive for truth. "Let's end this game," Jake stated, a determination spearing through him. Each second unspooled with infinite possibilities of what could happen next. Would Beaumont lash out, or would he cower under the brutal light of truth? Before he could finish his thoughts, the suitcase leaped from their shared focus with a sudden pull, Beaumont lunging toward it with desperate intent. Without thinking, Jake dove forward too, unwilling to let the antagonist reclaim what was rightfully out in the open. As they both reached for the suitcase, Jake felt the rush of adrenaline flood his body, quickening his reflexes and urging him onwards into a realm of confrontation where identities would clash and unmasking secrets would decide not just their fates, but the trajectory of Jake's burgeoning path. Caught in this whirlwind, he found himself once more at a personal crossroads. This battle was not merely against Beaumont. It was a definitive moment where he could either spiral back into the darkness of doubt or emerge from it, forging a new identity out of the wreckage of their conflict. With Beaumont clambering closer, Jake's heart pounded a rhythm of determination. The fierce desire to stand up for not just himself, but for everyone touched by Beaumont's malice boiling inside him. As he strained against the pull of the suitcase, Jake knew that the next move could shatter everything he had begun to forge. In that fleeting second, he had to decide. Push forth for justice now, risk everything he had learned, or find an even more powerful way to ensure Beaumont faced the consequences of his actions. The weight of that choice hung in the air, and as he clenched his jaw, the air around them charged with animosity. He could feel the precipice of change arise. With Beaumont wrenching at the case, Jake prepared to challenge the very foundation of the man standing before him. After all, what awaited them both was not just a battle of wills, but a deep dive into the chaos of their truths. What lay beyond this struggle would redefine who they both could become. Jake's fingers brushed against the cold metal of the suitcase. The sensation sent a wave of clarity washing over him, a reminder of why he was here. He wasn't just standing idly in the crossfire of Beaumont's corruption. He was a catalyzing agent in this confrontation. Each ounce of adrenaline coursing through him ignited his resolve to strip away the shadows that had long obscured the truth. The brief moment of uncertainty vanished as Jake focused on the weight of the suitcase in front of him. Beaumont was relentless, like a shark sensing blood in the water, but Jake felt a renewed energy surging within. The understanding that victory would come not just from physical dominance, but from the smart execution of his gathered knowledge. As they grappled, Jake's thoughts surged with questions that clawed at his mind. What did he want beyond this encounter? It was more than just taking down Beaumont. It was about claiming his own narrative, stitching together a story that empowered him, rather than dragged him into chaos. Despite the oppressive adrenaline, a clarity settled in. This was not just a battle against a corrupt man, it was the manifestation of his internal struggle. Beaumont's face twisted in anger as he rolled to his side, attempting to regain leverage. Jake pushed back harder, every ounce of determination fueling his strength. "I know what you're hiding," he said, voice steady despite the tumult around him. The suitcase felt like an anchor and he would not let it slip away. "I won't let you bury it any longer." Jake's sudden assertiveness caught Beaumont off guard, forcing him to pause. For the first time, Jake saw the two men not as adversaries, but as reflections of the paths they had chosen. Beaumont, engulfed in desperation and greed, while Jake stood on the precipice of self-discovery, driven by righteousness. This was not just about exposing Beaumont. It was about embracing his potential, a potential that had flickered to life through every glimmer of truth he had uncovered. Suddenly, the police dog sprang forward, teeth bared. A strange alliance formed, both animal and man spurred by an instinctive hunger for justice. It was a visceral reminder that loyalty existed where corruption sought to fray the threads of integrity. The dog's sudden growl added weight to Jake's resolve. He wasn't alone in this battle. He had an ally guarding against the chaos that surrounded them. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jake utilized the moment to regain control of the suitcase. He pushed against the weight of Beaumont's desperation and forced the lid open, revealing layered documents and photographs that shimmered in the dim light. A treasure trove of deceit. It felt victorious, like ripping off the bandage that concealed a festering wound. As he fanned through the contents, time seemed to compress, moments of uncertainty folding into the realization of his growing empowerment. Each piece had a story that screamed for acknowledgement, a crippling truth that could shatter Beaumont's empire at its core. Jake could feel his heartbeat synchronizing with the urgency of the evidence in front of him. The revelation of each photograph and document echoed a mantra in his mind. He could be so much more. Yet, Beaumont reacted with fury, lunging again with the reckless abandon of a cornered animal. The desperation in his approach revealed a vital truth. Power derived from fear would always buckle beneath the weight of accountability. Jake stood his ground, a stark contrast to the panic that surged within Beaumont. It was not just a physical showdown. It was a psychological Titan's war caught on the precipice of change, with Jake embodying the strength that would reshape his fate. Your reign of terror ends now. You can't hide from this anymore. Those words were a catalyst, echoing in the clashing silence. Beaumont's expression darkened, and Jake knew he had struck a nerve. This wasn't merely a challenge. It was the unveiling of a greater truth. As the standoff intensified, Jake felt the swell of determination lift him. He could stare down this corrupt figure and emerge from it not as a damaged boy, but as a man who reclaimed his truth. But would the weight of what already lay exposed be enough to achieve the victory he sought? The air around him thickened with anticipation for what came next. The suitcase lay between them, an entity of conflict and revelation. Jake was poised on the edge of discovery, a critical juncture where the future of both men would be irrevocably transformed. As Beaumont narrowed his gaze, preparing for a deeper confrontation, Jake felt the first true flicker of belief. The moment of truth was drawing nearer, a confrontation not only against the wrong he sought to reveal, but against the doubts that had long shadowed him. What lay ahead was unclear, but Jake knew he would not back down. Just as choices charted his path, so too did his courage. And suddenly, the weight of that courage surged within him, pushing him closer to the very edge of a new possibility, igniting the question, could he truly redefine not just his own story but deliver justice with the evidence he now controlled? The loud thud of Beaumont's heavy frame crashing onto the floor jarred Jake back to the present. Their locked struggle was momentarily interrupted, but the sight of the suitcase's contents glimmering in the dim light had forged a new urgency in him. Jake's heart raced as he maneuvered to elevate his position above Beaumont, blocking him from seizing the valuable evidence. This was no longer just a confrontation. It had transcended into an outright crusade for truth. Each hurried glance at the documents and photographs mapped out a labyrinth of deceit that Jake felt compelled to unveil. With fingers shaking from adrenaline, he rifled through the layers of incriminating evidence. This was his moment, not merely to dismantle Beaumont, but to recognize his capability for obliterating the influence of corruption. As Jake's mind raced, reality morphed into something more profound. He understood that this encounter wasn't solely against Beaumont's malevolence. It was a confrontation with the echoes of his own insecurities. Questions spiraled within him. Who was he really? A victim of circumstance, or a formidable force in crafting his own narrative? The cold weight of the suitcase served as a catalyst, pushing Jake towards a realization that the power to redefine his destiny lay within him. "Let go of it, Jake," Beaumont growled, his tone dripping with a mix of desperation and menace. The intensity in Beaumont's eyes revealed his acknowledgement of the tide shifting against him. This space had transformed into a battleground, but it was one in which Jake felt increasingly emboldened. "I won't let you vanish into the shadows again," Jake replied, his voice steadier than he felt. With every word, he peeled away layers of self-doubt. He remembered all the moments that had brought him here. The nights spent piecing together Beaumont's narrative, the sleepless hours spent learning the intricacies of the law, and the unwavering determination to seek justice not just for himself, but for all who had suffered under Beaumont's stranglehold. The police dog at his side growled, a low warning rumble vibrating through the tense air. Jake stole a glance at the beast, whose fierce loyalty intensified the resolve building inside him. He was not alone. His allies were both near and far, and he was ready to harness that support to unleash the truth. With renewed strength, he disengaged from the physicality of their struggle and stood tall, backing away slightly to assess the suitcase, now filled with the tales of malfeasance that encapsulated Beaumont's world. He could almost taste the freedom that lay on the cusp of exposure. Yet Beaumont, fighting against the inevitability threatening him, scrambled to his feet, anger flaring in the depths of his eyes. "You think you're the hero in this story? You're just another pawn in a game far beyond your understanding." His words struck a chord, igniting a flicker of doubt within Jake, but the assertion that he was merely a pawn could be nothing more than a desperate attempt to sow confusion. Jake's hands trembled with rage at the thought of being manipulated. It fueled him, igniting that inner fire even more. "Call me what you want," Jake said, his voice rising above the din of conflict. "But this ends here." As he leveled his gaze at Beaumont, he felt the weight of the suitcase behind him, a testament to his journey of investigation, growth, and resilience. This confrontation was more than a battle. It was the final step toward total emancipation from both the villain and his own lingering fears. But Beaumont unleashed a frantic push, and Jake barely sidestepped in time, feeling the rush of air as Beaumont's shoulder nearly connected with his chest. A sudden, sharp realization punctuated the intensity of the moment. This was not merely a moment of physical confrontation, but a personal revolution of will. He felt cornered yet defiant. The terror residing in Beaumont's eyes mirrored the anxieties that had haunted Jake for too long, the fear of inadequacy, the doubts of worth. And yet, instead of retreating, Jake stood firm, a new clarity coursing through every fiber of his being. He would either subdue Beaumont and his empire of lies, or face a greater truth in the process. His journey had led him here, a point of decision, a choice to either accept the role of victim or to rise as a victor. With the evidence at his back and courage igniting through him, Jake began to formulate a strategy in the face of mounting chaos. The next move was critical. He knew he had to outsmart Beaumont once and for all. As he thought through his plans, a profound determination settled within him, solidifying his ground. But just as he prepared to make his decisive move, a distant sound erupted, voices approaching in the corridor drawing closer. It was the cavalry. A flicker of doubt washed over Jake, the tension pitting against the pulse of adrenaline. Would he reach his goal before it was too late? The impending arrival of a force designed to restore order cast both hope and uncertainty, and Jake felt the stakes weightily shift. The moment of truth was rapidly approaching. He needed to define the narrative of this conflict, and quickly. The adrenaline coursed through Jake as he registered the sounds of approaching footsteps, a chorus of voices echoing in the corridor outside. Each second felt like an eternity as he deliberated on his next actions. His heart raced, not just from the fear of losing everything he had worked for, but from the thrill of the confrontation. He had come too far, embarked on too complex a journey, to let Beaumont slip away now. Glancing back at the suitcase, Jake felt an unyielding determination surge within him. This wasn't just about exposing Beaumont. It was about proving to himself that he could stand against the forces that had once held him captive in fear and doubt. As he prepared to act, ideas blazed through his mind, strategies crystallizing amid the chaos. He could use the approaching presence of the police to his advantage. "Beaumont," Jake proclaimed, stepping toward him with unexpected boldness. "You think you've orchestrated the perfect escape, but I've got what you fear the most. Truth." He watched Beaumont's expression shift, confusion surging amidst his bravado. For a fleeting moment, Jake glimpsed the brittle facade crumbling away. "Every step you've taken will be your undoing," Jake added, his voice cutting through the tension. The suitcase loomed behind him, its secrets now a tangible ally in his fight. He was no longer a timid player in Beaumont's game. He had become a decisive agent in the unfolding narrative of truth. In that critical moment, he reached for the suitcase and swung it slightly to emphasize its gravity. "With this evidence, I will make sure it's all out in the open. You're not just fighting me. You're fighting for your legacy that's built on lies." But Beaumont was not cowed. Instead, he unleashed a guttural roar, scrambling for control as desperation clawed at him. "You think that flimsy evidence can bring me down? You have no idea what you're truly up against." He lunged forward, but Jake was quicker, sidestepping the onslaught and positioning himself strategically between Beaumont and the suitcase. As he carefully oriented the suitcase toward the door, grounding himself with the realization of the unique situation he found himself in, a thought crossed his mind. What if this confrontation were not only a physical struggle against Beaumont, but also a psychological journey toward understanding his own capabilities? Each breath filled Jake with newfound clarity. It would be easy to succumb to fear, but he felt an awakening. He was claiming his narrative, rewriting the script of his life that had long been dictated by others. The internal questions, where he stood, who he was, were evolving. He was not simply a man confronting a monster. He was a seeker of justice, embodying resilience forged through trial and tribulation. As the voices drew closer, a symphony of authority ready to dismantle the chaos, he embraced the shift. A choice lay before him, one that would redefine his future. He would either cower away or confront Beaumont head-on with both conviction and courage. He could hear the faint sound of a dog barking, its growl resonating like an omen behind him, encouraging him to stand firm. Images of the loyal police dog flashed in his mind, embodying the strength he needed right now. "Let's end this, Beaumont," Jake challenged, his certainty hardening as the footsteps grew louder. He took one last look at the suitcase, symbolizing not only the imminent reckoning for Beaumont, but also the catalyst for his own transformation. Just as the door to the room burst open, Jake realized that this was merely the beginnings of his metamorphosis. In this chaotic tapestry of conflict, he found the strings of his own agency unraveling. Could this confrontation herald the beginning of a new era for him? With the rush of officers pouring into the room, Jake's path ahead shimmered with potential, yet uncertainty lingered. Was he ready to step fully into the role he was destined to play? This was only the beginning of a journey toward understanding the depths of his own courage. And then, as the tense atmosphere shifted again, Beaumont muttered something under his breath, a word that ignited a new fear within Jake. What if there were a deeper game at play, one that extended far beyond the walls of this room? The officers flooded into the room, the weight of authority hanging heavy in the air. Jake's breath hitched, but he grounded himself, using the presence of his colleagues to bolster his resolve. As they swiftly assessed the unfolding scene, it was evident that they would not be mere spectators. They were instruments of justice ready to plunge into the heart of corruption. "Jake, what's going on?" one officer called out, eyes darting between the suitcase and the two men at its center. "I have evidence," Jake replied, feeling the thrill of urgency replace his earlier doubts. "Beaumont's been running a scheme that preys on our community. All of it is right here." He gestured toward the suitcase, the contents gleaming like beacons of truth. Beaumont's bravado faltered momentarily, masking a budding sense of panic that crept in as the officers advanced, prepared to take control. He had been a puppet master for too long, weaving lies with skillful precision, but the strings were now unraveling in plain view. "You can't prove anything," he stammered, casting desperate glances at the encroaching officers who were unwinding his web. Jake stepped forward, empowered. "That's where you're wrong, Beaumont. I know what you've done." He met the eyes of his fellow officers, their expressions shifting from incredulity to determination. This was a community fight. As Jake spilled forth details about the land deals, recounting the names of families affected, the officers began taking notes, recording footage, and preparing to act. The courtroom of public opinion was shifting, the weight of legitimacy now resting on the scales of his testimony. Inside, Jake felt an undeniable surge as the burdens of fear and doubt dissipated. This was the metamorphosis he had long sought. No longer just a guardian in a uniform, but a man who had rallied all of his fears and transformed them into a force for the greater good. In the presence of authority, he had not succumbed but had risen. Amidst the chaos, he glanced momentarily towards the window. The sun spilled golden light across the landscape of oakwood pines he had once feared would only witness betrayal. Now, it was a beacon of hope, illuminating a path forged by truth and accountability. And Clara flashed into his mind. He imagined her grinning face, her pride radiating through the darkness he had fought to dismantle. "Let's see everything, Jake." One officer nodded in agreement, stepping forward, grounding the moment in collective authority. With a resolute breath, Jake knelt beside the suitcase, revealing the incriminating documents one by one, laying them bare for all to witness. Each paper was a testament to the resolve that had swelled through him. He recounted every instance of deceit, described the emotional toll on the lives intersecting Beaumont's trail of malpractice. This was no longer merely about pulling back a veil, it was a cathartic expression of his deepest convictions. The officers moved to secure the suitcase, and Jake met Beaumont's gaze, now laced with fear and disbelief. "And you thought you could escape the consequences of your actions," Jake stated, the weight of every word grounded in his newfound purpose. In this moment, he recognized the gravity of transformation. It wasn't just about exposing a foe, but proving to himself, and to the community, that truth could indeed emerge from shadows, that personal courage could provoke change in the world. As he watched the officers lead Beaumont away, there was an electric thrill coursing through him, the thrill of autonomy and self-acceptance. Jake Reynolds was no longer a man vacillating in uncertainty. He had achieved clarity, and with that clarity came unshakable confidence. This journey had reshaped his identity, unlocking doors to a future where his convictions would fuel not only his existence, but the legacy he would uphold for his children. As the last remnants of the chaos tranquilized, he felt the tension slip away, replaced by a warmth of accomplishment. Jake stood up, steadying himself for the next steps. He stepped out into the crisp air, the intimidating weight of the world's corruption now extinguished at his doorstep. No longer a bystander, he was a warrior for the truth. A man ready to reclaim the narrative of hope for his family and his community. Jake glanced at Max, who sat beside him, wagging his tail, a steadfast companion who had walked this road of discovery by his side. As they walked down the street together, his heart was lighter, and the future shimmered with possibility. This was a fresh start, a new chapter defined not by fear but by fierce integrity. And as Jake inhaled the autumn air, he understood. This was his triumph. He had transformed not just the lives touched by Beaumont's greed, but his own identity. He had faced down a flood of doubt and emerged as the steadfast guardian he always aspired to be. And he would continue to nurture that unwavering resolve, guiding others to embrace their truth too. Now was his time to shine. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, and this is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.